The tension remains for Vini. The coach doesn't trust him enough, and he wanted to leave that clear. Now there's a question mark about his future, and obviously his present. What's going to happen next? How Xabi Alonso deals with this? But Xabi Alonso has dealt with absolutely everything in 25 years, and he doesn't care what Vinicius is doing.
So on today's episode, El Clasico is on the way, obviously. We're going to be chatting Juventus as well because they've sacked Igor Tudor after 8 matches without a win. They're set to appoint former Italy boss Luciano Spalletti. But first, we are going to start with Sunday's El Clasico. So Real Madrid ran out 2-1 winners against Barcelona. Mbappe and Bellingham with the goals for Los Blancos. They've gone 5 points clear of Barca at the top of La Liga. But that really is the very least of it. And as you said, Guillem, so many different aspects to go at here. Let's take them one by one. Let's start with Vinicius Jr.'s angry reaction when he was taken off. So subbed for Rodrigo in the 71st minute. Something like words like, "It's always me, I'm going to leave the team, it's better that I go," is what I've read in various articles. But I've also seen, Guillem, you've written an article this week on the BBC Sport website which particularly focuses on his relationship with Xabi Alonso. So what is going on, and how seriously should we take that strop from Vinicius Jr.?
The relationship breaks down a little bit in the summer, but there is so many branches to this story. Starting with the fact that there is in the background negotiations about the renewal of his contract that finishes in 2027. And even though they were close to announce it before the Club World Cup, it was Vinicius who stopped it because he felt his status deserved more money, basically. Then Xabi Alonso comes in, and Vinicius starts most of the games, and he gets to the PSG game, and the day before the game, in the training session, it looked like he was going to be on the bench, and Mbappe was going to start with Gonzalo front. Eventually, he did start, but it did look like he didn't, and there was a big bust-up between Xabi Alonso and Vinicius. This is, again, you have to take this story a little bit out, because obviously Xabi Alonso, as we've been saying in this show, represents the predominant model of our times in terms of a style, the positional football, one that gives players roles and responsibilities, and one that determines in which part of the pitch they play and how they play. So that those that want to criticize it are calling it now rigid, a rigid style. Others would say it's where football is going, and players have to adapt. I think Vinicius hasn't fully adapted to that, number one, and number two, hasn't fully enjoyed the fact that Mbappe gets the number 10 and he becomes the center focal point of the club. So Club World Cup finishes, and after a little break, very, very small break, new season starts, and he sees himself that he's not untouchable, that he has finished only 3 games this season. And he's been on the bench. Rodrigo has been used on the left-hand side because Rodrigo wants to play in that side. And even though quite clearly Vinicius is preferred, but still not like finishes every game like others, Mbappe namely, do. So that tension has been brewing a little bit. And even though there's been conversations between the group and Vinicius, and Xabi Alonso and Vinicius, it got to the point in the Clasico where he gets replaced and he says all those things that you mentioned. Xabi Alonso goes like, "Come on, Vinny, hostia." Which I don't know how you translate that one, but it's like, come on, don't give me all that. And then by the point Vinicius comes off the pitch, Xabi's looking somewhere else, away in the distance. Now, how do you solve that? Well, there's a break of 2 days, so the players go away, Vinicius can come down, and of course he can apologize after the training session yesterday. And in the apologies, he forgets to mention Xabi Alonso, mentions everybody else, from the chairman to everybody else. So the tension remains for Vini. The coach doesn't trust him enough, and he wanted to leave that clear. Now there's a question mark about his future, and obviously his present. What's going to happen next? How Xabi Alonso deals with this? Well, Xabi Alonso has dealt with absolutely everything in 25 years, and he doesn't care what Vinicius is doing. He will use him in the way he thinks is appropriate.
Yeah. So I was just going to say, actually, James, kind of who needs who more, but with the team sitting 5 points clear at the top of La Liga, Xabi Alonso is in the stronger position, as good as Vinicius Jr. has been for Real Madrid, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's staggering, the story, particularly when you go back just 1 year and you think of the palaver that Real Madrid made about Vinicius Jr. not winning the Ballon d'Or and boycotting that competition, the show of support for him. And now, as Guillem says, we're in that negotiating phase of his contract. Guillem's laid out where Vinicius Jr. is on this. But, it is, remarkable that his deal ends in 2027 and he's not necessarily guaranteed of being a Real Madrid player beyond that. Of course, the big test for any Real Madrid manager is how you deal with big egos, the superstars. Guillem, is this just limited to Vinicius Jr., or are there other players at Real Madrid who have had similar issues with Xabi Alonso's use of them? Um, you know, Clearly Mbappe is having a great season, but yeah, in terms of making sure everybody else's ego is massaged and they feel happy, is it just Vinicius, or are there other big personalities in that dressing room who are kind of?
You're a naughty man. You naughty, naughty man. Because of course it's not just Vinicius. There is the feeling by certain players that yes, Xabi Alonso's style is rigid. Those players are the ones that have not been playing that well or not playing at all. Endrick being one, Valverde is not fully happy playing as a right back, but will do anything for the team. And generally, they come from a team culture in which almost everything was allowed. And by the way, in which they didn't win anything last season. Hence, Real Madrid going a different direction. And I think what we've seen is a little bit the adaptation to that way of doing things. Those that know Xabi Alonso, and we've had time in private, but also in public for many years, will tell you that Xabi is not the most warm of characters. It's not somebody that will just joke with you. There's I don't know if it's a coldness or a wariness about people he doesn't know when he's not in the right environment, and perhaps that has happened, that instead of the Ancelotti, arm around the shoulders, they're getting just instructions, and they're not getting the leeway that basically Ancelotti allowed these players. But you're absolutely right, James, in what you're saying. The club are saying whatever the coach decides, and they want Vinny to renew his contract. So they're not going to use it as his behavior as an excuse to get rid of him or look for somebody to put an offer. And there was because Vinicius every day is like a big drama. Just the last 2-3 days of the transfer market, he went to his representatives and said, "Look for a team for me." There was no offer for him, not even Saudi, and everybody had to calm him down. He goes up and down in terms of emotions, but it's quite clear that the direction the club has taken is whatever Xabi Alonso decides.
There's nothing new in that. I mean, Xabi Alonso at Bayer Leverkusen had that before. Hoffman, Tapsoba were players that had issue, and they know it's not the level of Vinicius, obviously, but Bayer Leverkusen is not at the level of Real Madrid either. The thing with Vini, though, these are battles that he could not win regardless. He can't. Mbappe was always going to be the boss of this team, regardless of if Vinicius was playing well or not well. It was always going to be Kylian's team. And with Xabi Alonso, why would you try to start fighting? And by the way, what we saw at the Clasico is not the first time that Vinicius showed his discontent after one of Xabi's decision, whether it was him starting or not starting, coming off early, not finishing the game, etc. So it's not even the first time that we kind of talk about it or look into this. You can't win that battle against Xabi Alonso. So if you're Vini, do you really want to be taking yourself out almost of this club, this team, this project now in year one of the Xabi Alonso era? Or do you want to be part of it? Because like Guillem just said, I'm not sure where you go next, really. And certainly I'm not sure if you can go to a better project than the one that you are in right now.
Okay, so why, I mean, in terms of his personality and what he's like, Guillem, why is he doing that? Why is he behaving like this? And why no offer for him then?
That deserves another block in the BBC about who Vinicius is. Oh, actually, yeah, I did publish it about a month ago, because you do have to explain that from the moment he's born, he gets born into a hostile world. And I think that's important, but obviously we tend to look at the things very close up and his latest reaction or the reactions when he's been substituted or etc. But he feels that he's fighting a battle to be accepted, to be respected, and as soon as it doesn't go his way, his reaction is, "See, I know they're not going to respect me because who I am, what I look like, where I come from." And it's very difficult to a young man to actually take that of his head when he's seen his family being disrespected or friends or people that he's still close to. So he comes out of his bedroom in the morning just thinking, okay, who do I have to fight today? And when he feels that he was the best player in the Clasico, arguably with Bellingham, he doesn't see any football reasons for why he's got to be taken out of the pitch. So it goes back to that he's got his essence, really, which is, I know the world is going to be against me. And by the way, it's time not to be quiet about it. And the same way that he protests about behavior from the fans, it just perhaps mixes things up and protest about being replaced. It's a lack of respect for the team, for the manager. But in his eyes, in his mind, it's what his mind and his body is asking him to do. By the way, I've never, ever seen anything like it. I mean, I've seen players kicking plastic bottles when they get into the bench and stuff like that, and maybe a little bit of a face or whatever. But that kind of shouting, when do you know your voice is going to be picked, as he was? I know that his entourage is now saying, no, he didn't say that he wanted to leave the team. He was actually saying, why am I leaving the pitch? No, he didn't say that. So there's all that context that I think is important, but only in shows like ours, we've got time to look into that. Generally, everybody else looks at Vinicius and says, that's wrong. He's got to be punished. I think there's more to it than that.
He was also one of those, Guillem, at the end of the game. So there was a big bust-up at the end of the game when Vinicius Jr. and some of the other Real Madrid players particularly sort of went for Lamine Yamal, which I know you think was targeted, was deliberate. I mean, that came from the build-up to the game. Is that genuine? Is that a bit of panto in there? Is that genuine antipathy between the players and the clubs?
Not really. I don't think... the likes of Carvajal and Lamine are going to meet at some point with the national side. But it was a very public display of disgust from the Real Madrid players towards Lamine, who happens to be the best player of Barcelona. And the basis of the handbags is just Lamine talking to Ibai Llanos, which is the biggest streamer in the Spanish language, about the Kings League, in which they both have teams, and they were going to meet each other the weekend, and there was a little bit of banter. That's the context, really. And then he said, you're still referring to Ibai Llanos' team. You steal and you cheat, like Real Madrid. It should have been taken just like that. Perhaps you shouldn't say it on the week of the Clasico. You have to say that. But it was used by the Madrid media and the players, and that includes Carvajal, who went to him and did the gesture with the hand. You shouldn't be talking. Vinicius did the same. Rodrigo, Courtois, and I was surprised about that. And you think, what's going on here? Everybody trying to bully, really, Lamine Yamal, because he's Barcelona's best player. And then he kind of said, some identified it as, let's meet outside. Again, his entourage is saying, no, let's meet in the return leg, he was saying. But in any case, it was all he could say. It was all quite, streetwise kind of behavior. But really, for me, the whole thing was completely orchestrated. And then the Young said, Frankie de Jong said after the game something that very clever, and it puts it in context. Like, if you really were upset about Lamine's words, just say it privately. You got his number. Go and say, Lamine, don't do that. That's not good for for the tension of these Clásicos. And still, what happened was very, very much in front of the eyes of the Santiago Bernabéu faithful, and very much directed to one single person who's the biggest threat of Barcelona.
I think there are two things here. Vinicius Jr.'s strop, I'm leaving, I'm out of this club, but only after I have confronted Lamine Yamal. at the end of this game. He's not so out that he doesn't want to be part of this fight. So that was good. And then also, I suppose, with Lamine, like, I completely agree with Guillem. This is almost recognition of the threat that Lamine poses to Real Madrid, how good a player he is, and how pointed they were in going after him. I think you also need the context of last season, where Guillem, how many games was it that Madrid hadn't won in the Clasico? They hadn't won a single one since
4 bad defeats where they conceded 16 goals.
Yeah.
So yes, that's the context.
So you could see how much that win and almost the desire maybe to rub it in their house meant to those Madrid players. And
it happened just very briefly at a time where Lamine is not at his best, and he will not be for a while. He's got a groin injury, which is delicate and difficult to treat because rest doesn't work. Operation doesn't work either. Surgery doesn't work. So it's just a matter of keep playing through the pain. And it affects especially players that like to dribble and change direction and improvise a little bit with his body, like Nico Williams has been suffering of that. Messi had a couple of instances of groin injuries that went on for months. So he couldn't really shoot. He did it once in the whole game. He couldn't really take on to fifth and sixth gear. So you've got that Lamine Yamal, who should be feeling sorry for, really, but obviously not Real Madrid fans or players. But that's the Lamine that we're going to see in a while. He will play because he's got to, but he won't be at his best.
And it's a shame, to be fair, that he's not his best. Like, it's a shame there was no Lewandowski or Rafinha and not a full Barca team. Just to go back on Lamine, I've got no issue with the trash talking and everything that he said before the game. I think this brings even more spice to the biggest game in the world, really, in the Clasico. Okay, then you need to do it on the pitch and deliver, because you can't open your mouth and then not do it. But as Guillem explained, he was not fully fit and his team was not 100% either. But for me, there's no problem. I think Chouameni said the same after the game. He said, yeah, it's all good for me. And I mean, I trash talk people here on holidays. I mean, come on. So, like, I think, there's nothing wrong with trash talking people before, during, or after games.
Yeah, but if it fires your opponents up, Jules, in the old beach football, do you know what I mean? If it's given Real Madrid something to pin up on the dressing room wall, then maybe it's not helped Barcelona.
True, although I don't think Real Madrid players at their level need to hear Lamine trash talking them to be extra motivated for it. I think this is, if you need that, I think you're in the wrong sport, really. But to be fair, I've got no issue with it at all. I thought it was pretty fun.
In the Premier Sports studios that we were doing the Clasico, I was standing up and going like, Vinny, don't forget, go until after this Barcelona player. And then it's, oh, look, Lamine is running away. I was celebrating the fact that there was so much spice in that Clasico. Next to me was Gaz Kamene. They were saying, oh, this is not a good idea because things could go out of hand. And I said, no, let it go. Handbags. It was great. It was great to see that is happening again.
In terms of another item on the to-be-discussed list from El Clasico, Dani Carvajal, we've already talked about him a bit, but has obviously suffered a knee injury, apparently out until the new year. Now, it was Valverde who started it right back in the game, and Trent Alexander-Arnold didn't get off the bench. But in terms of an opportunity here for Trent Alexander-Arnold to sort of really get his Real Madrid career going, obviously you don't want a teammate to be injured, but it does present an opportunity, doesn't it?
It's brilliant for him. Sorry, Carvajal, but it's an opportunity for him to actually fully get what Xabi Alonso wants. We haven't seen that yet. We've seen glimpses of what he can do, but he's got to understand his role. He's got to understand that not everything has to be direct, and not everything has to be with things that he's been put into his DNA for years at Liverpool and the club style. And he's an intelligent guy, so he will certainly adapt. Valverde has shown his disgust at playing in that position, but he may still be preferred against Valencia, for instance, because Trent is just recovering. I think he's been out since August. It's 2 or 3 months anyway, and now you've got a battle with Valverde and him on the right back, but I think he will be won by Trent, and it will allow him to get to the last 3 months of the season, perhaps as the inequivocal right back while Carvajal tries to recover, because he has been injured twice since he came back from his long injury, and okay, he's got the personality and the ability to battle for his place. But if Trent gets it right, this could be already the year in which he becomes the number 2 of Real Madrid.
The thing with Trent was, I mean, there will be games where his skill set is probably suited more for some opponents than not. Real Madrid host Valencia this weekend. I think you can play Trent for that, no problem at all. Obviously, the next game is Liverpool-Real Madrid in the Champions League. If you're Xabi Alonso, is this a game where Trent has to play, whether he starts or comes on? It's a game where you look at it and you think, is he really suited for this kind of game? Whoever he faces, Gakpo, Wirtz, Ekitike, whoever plays on that left-hand side against him, emotionally, is he right for Trent to go back and play in that game against Liverpool at Anfield after not having been involved for 5 weeks now, Guillem? And this is the whole thing. And again, I think there are games where he'll be perfect for Real Madrid and the way they play. And there might be other games where Xabi Alonso looks at it and said, I'm not sure, just on the defensive side of things, that he's right for this kind of opponents.
How much of a blow is it to the ego, James, if Valverde is chosen, say, for the Liverpool game? I mean, even just putting aside the fact that it's Trent Alexander-Arnold's return to Liverpool and whatever sort of welcome or, hostile reception he might get on his return, but actually just seeing Valverde playing in that position ahead of him.
I think particularly as Guillem has laid out, knowing that Federico Valverde doesn't want to play there. If the guy who doesn't want to play there is still starting in front of you, then that is a concern. And I think it shows that regardless of where he is at in his fitness, he needs to convince Xabi Alonso that he can do the job that Xabi Alonso wants him to do. I was at the Club World Cup. He'd just joined. Real Madrid, remember, paid Liverpool a fee in order for him to participate in that tournament. And it was almost a little bit too much too soon, I think, for Trent Alexander-Arnold then to be catapulted from, your final games with Liverpool. And let's not forget, it felt like every day for a few months towards the end of last season, we were just talking about Trent and Trent and Trent and Trent. He goes from that and all the emotion to being part of that Real Madrid team in the Club World Cup. He struggled. I was at the Real Madrid Al Hilal game where João Cancelo kind of kept getting in behind him. But yeah, I think he would want to have been more involved, more along with his integration. And I don't know what you do if you're Xabi Alonso going into that Liverpool game. Whether you think, is it right for me to play him? He knows his opponents. He knows the atmosphere, but that atmosphere might be targeted on him, depending, what reception he gets. Or do I just leave him out for it and just I've seen lots of in Italy. I've seen lots of players who've been signed from one club in heated rivalries be left out of the first game where those players get back. Just leave that player out of the firing line. I'm not sure Trent would be in the firing line at Anfield, but maybe it's still a little bit too soon.
I mean, it is. Just apart from the Trent Alexander-Arnold issue, Guillem, it is some game that to look forward to. It's a good chance for me to plug the fact that we've got commentary of it on 5 Live and BBC Sounds next Tuesday night. 4 Champions League commentaries on the way on the network next week. I know it's also PSG against Bayern, Jules, so we might even discuss that in a little bit. But what do you think on that front, Guillem, in terms of Real Madrid coming to Liverpool and what Xabi Alonso might do there?
So far, 12 wins in 13 games. And now they're able to, having lost against Arsenal, Liverpool, PSG, Atletico Madrid, both in the Ancelotti and Xabi Alonso era, but not being able to match the big guns. All of a sudden, they feel that they can. So it'd be, very interesting. The opportunity to see a team that is a different Real Madrid that we've seen in the last few years. One that wants to control matters on the pitch, to do that, it's been fascinating to see the evolution of Bellingham, for instance, who has gone from being the guy that does everything to, at least in the last 2-3 games, more contrived Bellingham, who does a great job for the team. He was in the Clasico, the one that intervened the most, that shoot the most alongside Mbappe. He provoked a penalty, gave an assist, scored a goal. So you've got the best version of Bellingham who thrives with these games. Against Liverpool, for instance, he will be one of those that he looks forward to. And on that, it was interesting what Xabi Alonso said of Jude Bellingham, and this is something that I'm sure Tuchel has taken note or knows already. But he says that Jude Bellingham is all about feelings, about expressing and connecting, and that's why he has good games certainly in the big matches generally, because he needs to have that fire in him. So how do you mix, for both Tuchel and Xabi Alonso, how do you mix that fire with organizing football? We'll have to see, but certainly one thing that has helped is that Bellingham has felt looked after by Real Madrid. In the international break, they gave him a lot of homework and looked after him and gave him more information about how he had to play. So he's felt protected. Not sure he feels the same about the national side right now, but if he is somebody that has to do with feelings, you better look after him, I think.
The most fascinating thing about Bellingham being back at this kind of level now is what Xabi Alonso is going to do with his midfield three, because now you saw the performance that Camavinga put against Barcelona, which was very, very good. I think Xabi was quite close to say after the game that he was just the man of the match. So we've got Bellingham back near to his best, really. Camavinga finally looking like all that potential, all that talent is there to be expressed. Tchouaméni has to play. Guller has been fantastic in the midfield three. Valverde, once he doesn't play as right back where he doesn't want to play, he's back in midfield where he wants to play. And suddenly you've got 5 players for 3 positions. And what do you pick? James was at the Real Madrid-Juventus game where really the Guller, Bellingham, Tchouaméni 3 didn't really work that well in terms of protecting the defense especially. It worked well with Tchouaméni, Camavinga and Bellingham, with Guller playing a bit wider against Barcelona. But who are the 3? Of course you can rotate and you've got great depth, and depending on the opposition you can go for what kind of strength you want and different profiles. But still, I think it's still quite interesting to see who Xabi Alonso will pick, especially for the Liverpool game, for example, where that midfield battle will be so important to win. Who is going to go for amongst those 5 players?
Yeah, I think it was interesting what Guillem was just saying there about Bellingham feeling protected, feeling the club's looking out for him, giving him lots of homework. Because what struck me going to that Juventus-Real Madrid game was how much Xabi Alonso seems, Guillem, to love Arda Güler. Seems to really, really love Arda Güler in terms of talking about this kid as being, he reminds me of Florian Wirtz. And I came away thinking, yeah, those other midfield players in that team, it's just like the attack was at one stage, where it's like, how do you fit, sort of Vinicius and Mbappe together? It's kind of like, well, now that Xabi seems to be besotted with Arda Güler, which one of the midfield players sort of drops out? Am I wrong? Is my instinct off?
No. When a manager talks very highly of a player, is he trying to look after him and prepare him for whatever comes next, like being placed out of his number 10 position, Güler, against Barcelona, for instance? Was he trying to do that? And certainly, he has been handed a team that hasn't got the kind of midfield, even though there are all these top players that Jules was mentioning, but not, I don't want to say across, but somebody that can give the tempo to the side, that can decide when he's short passing, when he's long passing, who can decide, when to pressure high, those kind of things. And Bellingham, I don't think he sees him in that role. He sees him closer to Vinicius and to Mbappe, perhaps even behind them in a kind of front 3. So that will release one of the positions in midfield, if you like. But Arda Güler is the one he wants to convert into that role of linking up the midfield. So he had to drop deep against Barcelona when he's actually a number 10, really. He did quite well in in wanting the ball, in building the attack from the back, but also was at fault for losing the ball that creates the danger for Barcelona for their goal. So he's still not perfect, but still wants him to grow in that role. So perhaps he's saying to him, just give me more. I know you're not in the place where you want to be, but I need more of you.
Right, let's James, let's move it on to Serie A. So Igor Tudor was sacked as the Juventus head coach on Monday after a run of 8 matches without a win. Juventus now 8th in Serie A, 9 points off the leaders Napoli, and they've turned to the experienced Luciano Spalletti as the replacement. So what sort of Juventus manager is Spalletti going to make, do you think, James?
One with a Napoli tattoo on his forearm after winning the league with Napoli a couple of years ago. I think that instantly gives him pedigree, regardless of tribalism and how this has gone down in Naples. I think Napoli fans are also acknowledging that their current coach is a former Juventus captain and Juventus coach. So fine, Luciano, you go and do you. But Juventus need experience at this moment. You mentioned their league position. Until last night when the caretaker manager, Massimo Brambilla, oversaw a 3-1 win over Udinese, they were winless in 8 games. They'd lost their last 3. They hadn't scored in those 3 games either. And so Juventus took drastic action. They're the first team to change coach in Serie A this season. That hasn't happened in, feels like, centuries. First time they've sacked a manager in October for 55 years. And so, I think maybe they would have given Tudor more time if someone like Spalletti wasn't available. But I think because Spalletti was available, the club has seized this opportunity. There's still 29 games to go. I think, sort of minimum objective, Champions League, which is only 3 points away, and then see where else they can go, see what else they can push for. Because the team has seen a lot of investment in the last 2 years. But there's been very little bang for the buck, either because the players that have been bought are not good enough or because the coaches have not been able to get the most out of them.
Do you think it was, I know with hindsight it's easy, but do you think it was a mistake to let him start the season and not make the change in the summer? Because he did well when he took over Thiago Motta, and that didn't work for different reasons. But he was never really going to set the world on fire for Juve, right? We agree on that. He's a good coach, and he did well at Marseille, did well at Verona before, no problem. But this is Juventus. This is like the top of the top, right? And do you think now it was a mistake with hindsight to have actually gave him this another season in where you could have made that change in the summer?
Look, I mean, when they signed or appointed Igor Tudor in March, this is someone who played for the club, understood the values of the club. And I think they felt that was important, having had Thiago Motta in charge for 7 months. Thiago never played for Juventus, had a past with Inter. That made a lot of fans suspicious of him. And, Igor had been an assistant to Andrea Pirlo as well, knew some of the players on the team. But to your point, he delivers Champions League qualification, which is what he was hired to do. There was a condition in his contract where if he realized that his contract would automatically renewed, but they could get out of it by basically paying him off with €1 million. It's there where the new general manager, Damien Comoli, basically comes in. And, there have been lots of reports about Comoli basically talking to Conte, talking to Gasperini, saying, you guys, you fancy the Juventus job? And either they weren't convinced by Comoli or they weren't convinced by Juventus at that moment in time. And so with the Club World Cup coming so quickly after the end of the season, they stuck with Tudor. I take your point, Jules, in terms of does his face really fit as a Juventus coach to make them a competitive team again? But, I think they were also looking at it in terms of the money that they'd spent last summer, a hell of a lot of money, and the cost of sacking Thiago Motta as well, €16 million. At the moment, there are 3 coaches on the Juventus payroll: Thiago Motta, Igor Tudor, and now Luciano Spalletti. That's taken up a lot of money. They've got UEFA have opened proceedings against Juventus about a potential financial fair play breach, which means they weren't able to do much last summer, and they're not going to be able to do much in January either. So I think that's another reason why they were thinking, if Tudor can make this work, it'll work for us. It didn't work.
So, simple question. What does Gasperini, Conte, Spalletti, Igor Tudor, and Thiago Motta got in common?
Well, the first three you mentioned have all been at Juventus in the past.
Yeah, but it's like, do you know what I mean? It's like, what is the bigger picture here? What are they aiming to do? What do they want to do? That defines how you design the squad, and how you spend your money and how you project yourself into the world, really. But I just don't see much in common between them.
No, I mean, look, the motto, Guillem, at Juventus has always been winning isn't important. It's the only thing that counts. It doesn't matter how you win. And, they have tried to change that. Back in the early 90s, they had a guy called Gigi Maifredi, who they thought was going to be the next Arrigo Sacchi, because that was the trend. That was where football was going at that time. Towards the end of their unprecedented winning run of 9 league titles in a row, they had Maurizio Sarri, because they thought Sarri would get the team playing higher up the pitch, be more ball dominant, create more chances for a team that had Cristiano Ronaldo in it. Sarri is the last coach to win the title with Juventus, but he was sacked after a year because, as Andrea Agnelli said it on the Juventus All or Nothing Amazon documentary, he said that year was a in the brown stuff year, if I'm translating diplomatically, even though they won. Even with Thiago Motta, Guillem, they tried to go with the next up-and-coming coach in Serie A, who was playing very avant-garde football, was playing football that was completely in step with the cutting edge at the moment. And look, they gave up on that after 7 months. I think all of this volatility also comes from a club that has obviously had a financial scandal which led to the resignation of Andrea Agnelli. The club has been sort of searching around for identity at leadership level since then. They were banned from Europe for a year, and they've tried to relaunch. They tried to reboot, particularly with Thiago Motta. And, they lost 3-0 to Fiorentina, 4-0 to Atalanta in March, and decided we can't afford not to be in the Champions League. And they tore it up and threw it in the bin. Maybe if we didn't have these big cliff edges where Champions League qualification is so important, Thiago Motta gets another year. They're more patient with him. But because qualifying for Champions League was so big for the club, that's why they brought in Igor Tudor. It's now why they brought in Luciano Spalletti.
And that was going to be my question, Jules, was how good a job is it for an incoming manager for Spalletti to get, given everything that James is talking about there with the club and the turmoil and everything that's gone on in terms of Spalletti coming in the door, how good a job is it to get?
I mean, it's still Juve, right? And I think Juve in itself is one of the biggest jobs, if not the biggest jobs in Italy, on Italian football. The squad is decent, right? We talked a lot or enough about Igor Tudor changing his mind about the number 9, whether it was Jonathan David or Vlahovic or Panda, and neither of them really firing. And even when Vlahovic was scoring goals, he was still sat on the bench the next game or things like that. But there's talent there. There's certainly more talent than being in that position in the league so far from the top, when it's been a very competitive Serie A season so far, where there's not much really, if you look at it, between the top 5, and yet Juve are out of that, when it's a season where they should really be in that mix. But there's enough talent, and for Spalletti, and I think such an iconic manager, whether it was at Roma or especially at Napoli, to go and get that job, I think it's a good thing for Serie A, it's a good thing for Juventus and for Spalletti, especially after what happened with the national team. But really, I think all of us are very curious to see how you turn this around. What do you do tactically? What do you do in your man management? What are you doing in the big games coming up, including the Champions League? So again, you go back to disappointment, great. But there's games coming up every 3 days. Then there will be the international break very soon now, where everybody pretty much from that squad is going to go away with the national team, some really far away. Then they go back, they come back. Then you've got more games every 3 days and not much really to work on. So Spalletti will have to find the right formula pretty quickly without too much work on the training ground.
The weekend football in Serie A on Saturday as well, James, saw Jamie Vardy score his first goal for Cremonese, making him the oldest English player to ever score in Serie A. That immediately makes me wonder, I don't know the answer to this, it might be an unfair question to ask who that was before Vardy. I don't know, I'm going to go and look that up. Will James know?
Of course, he knows everything.
Does he?
Well, no, I don't actually know the answer to that. It can't be. It can't have been like Greavesy, because Greavesy, when he was briefly at AC Milan, was still in his late 20s. Yeah, I don't know.
Platt. No, how old was Platt when he was in Italy?
Yeah,
Platt was in his late 20s as well, because he came back to Arsenal, didn't he, when he was still in his sort of early 30s. Yeah, and even more recently, we've only had this sort of trend of, it's been a trend of young English players or young British players coming to Serie A. So even Danny Dicchio at Samp.
He's got it.
He's got it. It's really recent, James. It was in 2021.
2021. Chris Smalling, Smaldini.
No, but not far. Similar kind of player profile.
Okay, so a centre back.
Well, a defender English kind of thing, but like really not a big name.
Kyle Walker.
Oh.
I don't know, Jules. Who is it?
For Inter Milan?
Jules.
Ashley Young.
Yeah.
Ashley Young.
Yeah.
Ashley
35
Young.
years old.
Yeah.
Young
anyway, the point wasn't to finish the show with a quiz, actually. But what about what sort of headlines did that make, James? How's Vardy getting on?
He's getting on, both in terms of his age and on the pitch. I think there was some disappointment really after he joined that he wasn't more involved. Cremonese started the season really well. They beat AC Milan at San Siro in their first game. That was a big shock. They've only lost once so far this season, newly promoted Cremonese, and they are in the top half. And so, in answer to your question, there were particularly moments over the last 3 or 4 weeks where in Italy they say a winning team you don't change. And so it was very hard for Vardy to get into a team that kept getting points. But now Davide Nicola, the Cremonese coach, has tried to integrate him, change the system a little bit, goes 2 up top. That's what happened against Genoa on Wednesday night. And yeah, the thing, it's quite tough for him, Ali, because he's got this guy called Federico Bonazzoli who plays up front for Cremonese as well. I don't know if you saw Bonazzoli's goal against Genoa last night. It was similar to his goal against AC Milan on the opening day of the season. The guy just scores worldies, scissor kicks, bicycle kicks. And when you've got a player doing that who's Italian, it's difficult, even for someone with Vardy's profile and all of the excitement that there was around Vardy at the beginning of the season. It's difficult for him to basically make a case to be starting ahead of him.
Guys, that's just about it. In terms of this Champions League football coming up next week then, Guillem, and we've touched on Liverpool-Real Madrid, obviously, which is, standout game on the Tuesday night. Is that the one you're particularly looking forward to? Anything else next week in particular that catches your eye?
PSG Bayern Munich is definitely one.
Surely, yes.
I love the Newcastle Athletic Club, obviously. Anything that has to do with Marseille in it, and Atalanta, that should be a crazy one. And to see Barcelona, I don't think Barcelona are going to reach the heights of last year. And if that doesn't happen, let's see what happens with Hansi Flick, that failed already the second year at Bayern Munich. So those would be interesting ones.
Yeah.
Bayern comes to
Bayern, Jules?
Yeah, Bayern comes to Paris on 14 wins in 14 games this season, beating, Capello's and Milan's record, James, of 13 in a row. Nobody has ever started a season with 14 and 0, basically, if you like your basketball or American sports score announcement. 14 and 0 is pretty amazing. They come to Paris to play a team with more injuries. We saw Désiré Doué, what looks like a really bad injury for him in that 1-1 draw against Lorient, a PSG team not really firing in the league, certainly a bit differently in the Champions League. So this should be an absolute cracker on Tuesday night.
Yeah, and Napoli, James, they're first up on Tuesday, 5:45. So we've got commentary of Slavia Prague against Arsenal, 5:45 kickoff UK time on Tuesday. But Napoli, obviously, off the back of that thrashing they took at the hands of PSV.
Yeah, and look, I mean, things have really picked up for them in the league since they beat Inter at the weekend when no one was expecting them to win, and they won in midweek too. But in that win over Inter, the opening goal scored by Kevin De Bruyne steps up to take a penalty, and in taking the penalty, he pulls a muscle, I think, in his hamstring, and is now out until the new year. So Conte already had injuries. Lukaku hasn't played at all this year. McTominay and Højlund came back from international break with injuries. Rachmani's been injured. So it's a long casualty list. Jules was mentioning PSG's injuries. Conte is counting them at Napoli as well. So, yeah, I mean, they really need to get a result against Eintracht Frankfurt after that, as you said, morale-sapping defeat against PSV.
Guys, thank you. That's flown by. It's always an absolute pleasure to speak to you. Guillem, Balague, James Horncastle and Julien Laurens interrupting his holiday. So, Jules, we're recording this. This is like 10 o'clock UK time now. Is there a little family game of cards or something to just round off the night?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we played with James before the Champions League final. Very competitive. We've got great games that the kids love. I can name them, but I'm not sure if we're allowed to. So
French games.
The card game Julien has got. We played it when we went skiing together, and we played it in Munich for Champions League final. It is the most addictive, the best card game that has ever been invented.
I love games.
It's incredible.
Really?
Yeah, and we've got a new one,
James,
that you would love as well. Yeah.
Guys, I will see you all soon. Enjoy the European football, the Champions League football next week. Thank you very much to the guys. Thank you for listening. That is it for this edition of the EuroLeagues on the Football Daily podcast.
The Football Daily podcast
on BBC Sounds.